Welcome to Openings Explained with Jonathan Schantz, who I clearly am not. I am Dennis LaRue, filling in for Jonathan while he recovers from his amazing and comprehensive 10-part series on the Semislav Botvinnik variation. Obviously, just kidding. Jonathan's a little busy with a Norms tournament that we've got coming around the corner, so I happily filled in to go over one of my favorite openings. And you would expect from a player of my strength that this would be one of my favorites, because while I have somewhat of an understanding of positional chess, I'm at heart a coffee shop player, and I love Gambit lines, which disregard the idea of maintaining material equality from the beginning in exchange for rapid attacking chances, rapid development, and just overall fair to excellent chances for a quick win. So I picked the Danish Gambit, which exemplifies all of these themes, which you will find in any Gambit line. Okay, so as I was just talking with the audience, we were talking about opening repertoires and kind of what he plays, what one of the audience members plays, and the Italian game came up, and what I told him was that's a super solid way to handle open games, namely the answer E5 in response to E4, which leads us into the broad category of open games, all sharing the common characteristic of the objective being a kingside attack, and open center being one of the things we want to strive for when we play E4 and are met with E5, and as in all openings, we want to develop rapidly. And with all of these ideas in mind, again, not concerned with losing a pawn or two in order to get our pieces out fast. We answer E5 with D4. Black accepts, seeing no logical reason not to, and whether or not you intend on declining the gambit, most people agree. Most players at the higher levels would say that taking on D4 is a reasonable choice. White, not satisfied with gambiting just one pawn, says, "You can have another, my friend." Black, in the spirit of liking free stuff, takes it. And for those of you, for the fastidious among us, no doubt Black can decline the gambits in this way. White can answer by taking with a bishop and having a slightly better position, in as much as he has the space advantage, he's controlling stuff, and he has a piece developed, whereas Black has none of that. Another response that I often see in the casual play area, where I play this several times a week, is knight f6, to which I will always answer with a response that will seem familiar to those of us who play one knight f6 in answer to e4, the Alyekin defense. In a similar spirit, I just go for the early e5, e4, e5 push, and Black has to be very accurate in his response. Knight h5 is really a case in point, illustrating why a knight on the rim is grim or dim, as the old saying goes, and knight g8 is certainly just as bad as it looks, setting up for the next game, as one of our favorite GMs here likes to say. So, centralizing the knight, and this, by the way, was a recommendation of Nimzovich, one knight f6 in answer to c3. You have to centralize the knight. White says, "I will gladly take that strong pawn center." Black protects the knight, and we're just playing chess at this point. To go any further down that line is kind of outside the scope of the Danish Gambit accepted, which is what we're looking at today. So, after Black accepts the pawn on c3, again, White throws caution to the wind in favor of the principles of rapid development. He neglects the idea of material in the idea of recapturing the pawn on c3 in favor of rapid development, already setting our sights on that frail and weak f7 square, which is the theme in so many of these e4, e5 openings, an attack on f7, that is. And Black says, is this guy a beginner? He just gave me 3 pawns in the opening. White says, I gave you 2. This third one was just a means to further my agenda of developing rapidly. We not only have 1 bishop on a strong diagonal, but we have 2 at this point. And one thing we'll see as we look through the rest of the theory in the oncoming moves, that this is a serious problem. The weakness of the g7 square, as pointed out or accentuated by the bishop on b2. It makes it really hard for Black to develop on this king side and get ready to castle, because he always has to be concerned with bishop takes b7, even though in some lines Black certainly has this option, which we will be looking at several points and stages in this crazy and wild opening. But often, and especially in the lines that we're going to look at tonight, it's just not enough. So with that in mind, kind of look into the future and just know that this is going to be our main line, so to speak, known as the Schlechter defense, pioneered by a very strong player of yesteryear, Karl Schlechter. And it's a really cool idea that encourages Black to just accept the gambit all the way, because he can play this great d5 move. But we will get into that after we've looked at some of the more common responses, which I definitely see more than d5 when I'm playing casual players and when I'm playing, you know, my crowd, the 1600 and under crowd. So after bishop takes b2, Black can also try and follow opening principles, saying, I have all this extra material. I'm going to follow that Steinitz principle of knights before bishops. Knight c6 is arguably best answered by knight f3. Black can answer this in 2 ways. And I paused for a moment because it occurred to me that I didn't look at 5, queen e7, which is actually a poor idea, but it's a natural idea. In response, instead of putting our knight on c6, we're going to be pinning this or attacking this undefended e4 pawn, as well as threatening with the move 5 queen e7, that is. So knight f3, queen e7, natural look and move. At which point White can just proceed with completing his development in castle kingside. Black plays d6, not grabbing the pawn on e4. And just to kind of throw a question out to you there, can you see why he plays d6 instead of grabbing the pawn? And that's fine. And, yeah. So already, and we might step back to look at even earlier examples of this. You're going to see that there's a lot of cool tactical ideas hidden in here. And if Black is careless, he will quickly get himself into a losing position. So again, just as the theme of not moving the bishop occurs in a lot of these lines, because the bishop on b2 is always attacking g7, we'll also see many themes and see many cases in which White can play an early e4, e5, or, as in this case, just leave this e-pawn hanging, because if Black were greedy enough to take, White would answer with the killer, rook e1, skewering the queen against the king. acquiring a winning material advantage. Black sees that in this case and just play d6, to which we answer knight c3, and black can respond with knight f6. Bishop g4 is another idea, but we'll take a step back after we've finished looking at this line to look at the rest of that. So knight f6 is best answered by knight d5. This knight on c3 is obligated, as famously said by Aaron Nimzovich, to occupy d5 as quickly as possible, especially in a gambit line. But just in general, this is a helpful little seemingly obvious saying, and it certainly doesn't always apply. You know, if d5 is attacked or defended by c6 or something like that, then probably don't want to put your knight there. But in many cases, we overlook a move like knight d5, exchanging off one of black's strongest developed pieces, the knight on f6, hindering some of our activity in the center. More or less forced, or he has to move his queen, costing him yet another precious tempo, slowing down his development. Giving us the opportunity to open up the e-file, which black will reasonably try and close, and white will not allow him to. Again, with the same theme of being able to hang a piece on the e-file, because if black is greedy and takes it, we skewer. And because of the idea, because of the rule of the king never being able to leave himself in check, this queen is not able to move out of the pin. Okay? So keep that in mind when you try this at home, that skewer on the e-file is a common theme in these lines. You think you'd be willing to try this so far based on the little bit that we've looked at?
Yeah.
Yeah? All right. Yeah. I strongly recommend it in casual and online games. Just because, one, it teaches us the price of failing to attack when we have more developed pieces, despite having some sort of material deficiency. But two, it just, it's a great way to kind of expose yourself to a lot of forceful attacking ideas. One of them being this bishop sacrifice on f7. Have you seen that in any of your games yet? Okay, well, I'm telling you, you play the Italian, you're going, as you get deeper into it, you're going to see that bishop takes f7 is a pretty common theme. Position, we've looked at 5 knight c6, kind of explored some of white's answers for that. After black responds to knight f3 with queen e7, and now instead, if he decides not to, block in his dark squared bishop with that move, that not so good move of queen e7 there, and he continues listening to Steinitz, and he says, okay, knights before bishops, knights before bishops. I'm going to put my knight on f6, and white says, hey man, I've got all these themes memorized. The bishop takes on g7. If black's dark square's bishop ever moves, and any chance you give me, I'm going to play e5. And open up this e-file with force, or at least kick away any defenders of the center. So e5 will force black onto e4 like it did in the other line with the early knight f6, the really early knight f6. And here we get an example of what I was talking about, a thematic sacrifice, which you, my friend, I'm envious of you, because this was like one of the things that definitely hooked me into chess, that you learn all these rules about, oh, you can win a game if you just control the center by occupying it, get your stuff off the back row first, and don't lose stuff. And that's true to a point until you start playing other people who study, and then you need to learn more forceful ideas, sacrificial ideas, like this bishop takes f7 check, which just looks crazy, right? We just gave away 2 pawns, and we're going to give away a bishop. But when black replies by taking it, we're just going to ignore king e7 right now because it blocks in the dark-scored bishop and looks even worse. At least black can try and weather the storm by taking that bishop, and then we play a move that looks kind of like a beginner move. But far from it. The queen is coming out with force, and she is giving us an example of what is at the foundation of all of the majority of tactical ideas, the double attack. She performs a simple queen fork on this knight on e4 and the king on f7, forcing him to move, getting back some material in a pretty strong attacking position, keeping in mind that this guy is never going to castle unless he's playing a beginner, and then we can we can castle and see if our opponent knows the rules, right? After we've gotten the stuff out. But I don't necessarily recommend that, but it's worth a try once in a while. Yeah, make sure everyone's paying attention. Okay. So hopefully that satisfies us as to why knight f6 doesn't work, because you can just kick it away with e5 and start your attack, and follow through on that attack by taking on f7 with the bishop. Okay. All right, let's take it back just a little bit and get into black trying to solve this problem and defy white's attack on the g7 pawn with this beautifully placed bishop b2. And this is something that I see very often online and in the casual play area right there. Bishop b4 check. To which you can reply, and I often do, but we're not going to look at that too much tonight, maybe some other time, with king f1. But for those of us perhaps a little hesitant to forfeit our castling rights, there are definitely many other reasonable responses to this bishop b4 check, one of them being knight d2, taking note of the fact that we're not putting our knight on c3, allowing our bishop to maintain his threat. Knight f6, can you guess what we play here, or just read the notation if you want? Yeah, I don't know. But anyway, yeah, what do you think we play here based on the other lines that we've looked at? It's okay if you read it. G3. Why G3?
It develops, gives you a castle, breaks it in.
This,
Knight to F3.
Knight to F3.
Yeah.
Okay, knight to F3, that's what you,
Yeah.
all right.
G,
Got it. No, I get it. I get what you're saying. Yeah, knight F3, not bad. Protecting the pinned piece and getting ready to castle, like you said. But we just gave up 2 pawns. So the price for that is that we got to be super aggressive. And if we play even one slightly passive move, then we're going to pay for not caring about having our material. And for that reason, we got to take advantage of this advanced d4 pawn and kick that knight away. So whenever you see knight f6 in this line, just check, and you can almost automatically play e5, I would say. Almost automatically. And yes, there are ideas like queen e7 here. To which we'll just answer with queen e2, renewing the threat of taking this guy. And it can get pretty wild at that point, but I don't want to trail off into too much craziness. I just want to give us a good general idea of some ways that this line can go. And so that being said, after knight e4, he was just kicked away. We again follow through with this wild sacrifice idea. So Like some of the clues are, if the knight's on f6, can we kick it away with e5? If the king is not castled yet, can we take on f7 with the bishop? Because almost always, if he takes, we'll have this similar idea of forking his dark squared bishop, all right? And he'll run and we'll take it and we'll say, ha ha ha. Okay. But in some lines, we have to be aware of the fact that he can say, I'm on to you and your crazy idea of giving stuff away so that you can draw my king out. I'm not going to take that bishop. To which we have a wild response that is hard to find and separates the strong attackers from the not so strong attackers. And that is this wild answer to king f8, bishop a3, putting it on an attacked square. If we look at the direct response to that, it's just taking on e4, at which point the king will capture on f7, and then can you guess the theme? So we've looked at the e4, e5 being a theme, bishop takes f7 check being a big theme in the Danish Gambit. What's another theme that I haven't really pointed out, but maybe you'll see? It's this fork with the queen against the bishop and king. Yes, sir. And in this case, where's she going? Yeah. Well said. And you convinced? Would you'd more or less, maybe not. Yeah, I'd be happy to take white here, honestly, because I just got to move my knight and castle, and black still has 2 minors to develop. His king is never leaving the center, and I think I could work with that. Not making the claim that we've comprehensively explored all of the possible answers and plans for black up until this point, but these are the general ideas for black, and this is one of the most popular and the strongest responses to this whole idea of giving up your D and C pawns to get the bishops on those strong diagonals and develop some sort of kingside attack quickly. And that is the freeing move, d5. At which point it is strongly recommended for white to just take the bishop. Black will play knight f6, and here e5 just doesn't work simply because you hang the bishop on d5, right? We're not too concerned with that. We've got 3 minors developed in comparison to the 1 in black's camp. And calculation will let them know that this is more or less the best way for him to proceed, by exchanging off his only developed piece on d5, bringing out his other knight, and giving us the opportunity to play queen b3. Okay. Taking note that if we're not careful and we play knight f3, and then queen b3, black, as is the case at almost every turn, which is what makes it a double-edged opening as opposed to like a solid opening, he has a chance for some tactical ideas too. And knight b4 or bishop b4 are good examples of that. Knight b4 working this pin on the queen. You know what? You're going to see me doing some Danish Gambit stuff on Tactics Time. So if you liked it, get ready for more. If not, you've been warned. All right, thank you for joining us. See you guys next time.